The enemy knew the war was won, then humanity struck back. The massive hull of the human supercarrier unfolded its forward deployment gates in the pitch-black expanse. The white Singularity Lance targeted the giant Imperial flagship. There was no frantic shouting on the human bridge. Admiral Marcus Kane stood at the center platform with his hands folded behind his back. Beside him, a heavy hand-wound stopwatch ticked inside a scratched silver casing. The sound was a soft, steady click against the digital hum of the deck. Kane did not look at the screens. He watched the mechanical dial creep toward the top of the minute. The enemy army had already won the war across 80% of the star charts, but humanity had just struck back. The silver dial hit the zero mark. Kane pressed the primary ignition link. I cannot tell you the ignition cycle paused there. It did not. The real cost was calculated in minutes. Stay close. 15 years earlier, the communication arrays on Command Station Aegis had completely broken down. Commander Talon sat in the dim war chamber, watching his avian feathers drop from pure exhaustion. The alliance was entirely finished. The enemy fleets had burned every major system, and the proud capital world of Nova Prime stood next on the casualty registries. Then, a dead diplomatic wire sparked with unencrypted text. The technician did not call for a clerk. He keyed the main desk feed directly. The words appeared in gold across the broken map. Humanity has received your distress call. Hold the line. We are coming. The text did not explain where the humans had hidden for a decade. It raised a single question that no one in the room could answer. Talon stood up, his gray wings tightening as he ordered the remaining 3,000 damaged starships to anchor the upper atmosphere. Deep inside the capital sector, Warlord Zorith received the intercepted gold signature. He stood 8 feet tall, his obsidian-scaled skin reflecting the harsh light of the Imperial tactical grid. The Imperial math had already proven total victory. Rebellion was an unscientific anomaly. Zorith did not hesitate or hold a council. He immediately deployed a massive 20,000-ship interception armada to the outer boundary. His cybernetic respirators whirred with a heavy rhythm as he locked the trajectory commands. The Imperial army moved to clear the expanse before the new threat could bridge the jump lanes. They expected a broken remnant. They did not know the dark was already moving against them. Admiral Kane monitored the incoming Imperial formation from the bridge of the Eternal Resolve. The 20,000 enemy vessels formed a dense wall of plasma batteries across millions of kilometers. Kane's silver-rimmed cybernetic eye whirred as it calculated the closing speed. A junior officer reported the sheer size of the blocking line, his voice shaking. Kane simply turned the dial on his silver stopwatch 3 times. He did not order a retreat or a change of vector. He commanded the entire human fleet to accelerate straight into the center of the trap. The human ships did not scatter. They moved in a perfect, silent block, their engines burning hot against the void. The Imperial blockade opened fire at maximum range. Millions of tracking heavy missiles surged forward, lighting up the dark sector with a blinding storm of red plasma. The destruction slammed directly into the human vanguard. On the Imperial command ships, crews prepared to log a standard victory, but the explosions cleared and space fell completely silent. The human fleet remained entirely untouched. A bright blue harmonic barrier surrounded every human vessel, turning the Imperial thermal drift into harmless static. Not a single hull had buckled. Kane's armada continued to advance, its speed increasing with every second. Humanity answered the volley with a single coordinate lock. The supercarrier fired its primary white lance across the void. The beam struck an Imperial heavy cruiser in the front line. The 20-kilometer capital asset did not burn or fracture. It vanished. The space where the ship had stood was suddenly empty, replaced by a clean pocket of subatomic dust. The Imperial defensive line instantly fractured as thousands of secondary human cruisers opened their missile tracks. Absolute white energy columns crossed the sector in parallel rows. Imperial destroyers shattered in rapid succession, their central control networks dropping offline before they could send a single distress report. Warlord Zorith watched his regional display screens turn completely black. The entire interception armada had been dismantled in less than 10 minutes. The hypercentralized command network he relied on had left his outer captains paralyzed without his direct inputs. He dropped his cybernetic breathing mask, staring at the telemetry logs in silence. The remaining Imperial escorts drifted without propulsion or data links. The human fleet did not stop to collect wreckage or celebrate the victory. The armada cleared the sector at full burn, leaving behind a sea of burning metal. The data drops from the broken Imperial ships had just exposed a new coordinate path. The scanning files revealed a secret facility hidden deep within the Forbidden Sector. The structure was a metal planet 400 kilometers wide, surrounded by 300,000 warships. It carried the name of the World Breaker. Inside the human briefing room, fleet commanders studied the internal blueprints. The facility relied on a central fusion reactor that sat beneath hundreds of kilometers of heavy armor plates. A direct fleet strike would take days to penetrate the outer shields, giving the station enough time to cleanse Nova Prime. Colonel Sarah Vance stepped to the front of the command platform. She did not ask for a division of battleships. She volunteered her elite 30-person strike unit for a stealth cloaking drop. The Shadow vessel slipped inside the maintenance docks of the giant station without activating a single sensor alert. Vance led her team through the massive industrial corridors, their boots silent against the metal floor. The air smelled of recycled coolant and scorched iron. For 3 hours, they bypassed automated security loops and disabled regional surveillance feeds. They moved deeper into the lower tiers, heading toward the central core. Then an internal diagnostic wire flagged a broken terminal sequence. A loud siren began to echo through the ceiling panels. Crimson warning lights flashed across the walls. The mission had just become a direct race against the station's activation clock. Dominion security forces flooded the main transport junctions from every direction. Heavy blaster fire illuminated the dark corridors as Vance's unit established a defensive perimeter. The team fought with absolute precision, each soldier covering a specific vector line, but the Imperial numbers were endless. A heavy plasma blast rocked the structural rib of the hallway, throwing 2 human operators backward. Vance fired her rifle until the power cell clicked empty, then chambered a new load without dropping her gaze. They had reached the outer safety ring of the reactor, but the automated bulkheads were already sealing the exit paths. The team broke through the final security gate, entering the massive circular reactor chamber. Energy storms danced across the gigantic containment fields that fed the main cannon. The unit's engineer immediately attached the overload arrays to the terminal grid. He worked fast, his hands steady despite the constant bombardment shaking the floor. The terminal screen lit up with an orange warning link. The overload sequence was fully armed, but the central system demanded manual physical validation to lock the error loop. The automated program would abort if the switch was released before the final detonation cycle completed. The remaining soldiers refused to leave the platform, their weapons pointed at the fracturing entrance. Vance did not allow a discussion. She used her command override code to seal the evacuation bay doors from the inside, locking her team on the side of the transport pod. She turned back to the primary terminal alone. Through the reinforced observation window, she could see the Imperial reinforcements breaching the inner perimeter. Warlord Zorith entered the chamber at the head of the division, his gray crests rigid. Vance looked at the central countdown line. It held exactly 60 seconds. She smiled at the warlord and pressed her hand flat against the validation plate. The core fusion network entered a state of critical failure. Energy levels skyrocketed across the 400-kilometer structure, shorting out the primary weapons and life support links simultaneously. The surviving strike team accelerated away in their transport craft, watching the metal world grow small behind them. On the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, Kane watched the tactical feed drop into pure static. He did not speak. He did not look away. He pulled his silver stopwatch from his uniform vest. The ticking inside the casing had stopped entirely, the dial frozen at the precise second of the manual override. A blinding wave of white light erupted from the center of the forbidden sector. The giant station shattered into thousands of burning fragments, the explosion consuming the surrounding Imperial fleet in a localized shockwave. The regime's central command lines collapsed across every occupied territory. By the next morning, automated surrender signals began to appear on every Alliance receiver from the outer rim to the core systems. The empire that had ruled through mathematical certainty for 2 decades broke apart in a single day. Months later, a new monument built from polished granite stood over the central square of the rebuilt capital orb. 30 names were cut deep into the stone, their edges catching the morning light. Admiral Kane stood before the crowd, his silver eye perfectly still. The people did not shout or cheer. They watched the sky as a massive human fleet passed overhead in a silent, golden formation. Kane looked down at the scratched silver casing resting on the memorial ledge. The shadow of 30 gold letters was cut deep into the polished granite.